Here we are again. The number 3 panel, it's quite interesting because it sort of builds in some ways on all the panels. This is about small states, but small states like big states have complexes and ambitions. But the title of this session 3, is Small States, Big Challenges, How to Navigate the Changing World Order as a Small Country. So, it's quite like all the sessions, this is quite complicated and complex. Very briefly, this crisis of multilateralism and the rules-based international order, as well as the return of great power rivalry, pose particular challenges for small states. And there's some small states over there, as they are much more dependent on functioning international norms and institutions. In a world in which the rule of law is replaced by the law of the strongest, and wars again becoming the continuation of politics by other means, they must fear for their very existence. We'll know in a minute. What strategies should the small states pursue to survive and thrive in this uncertain world? Well, a man who has to deal with these questions every day is the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama. Welcome, Prime Minister, and thank you for coming. And your trademark shoes. Hello. And I'm also very happy to introduce our group of experts. This room is full of experts, some of whom have also held government positions in small states, from left to right. Again, Madam Al-Ketbi, President and founder of the Emirates Policy Centre. Many thanks for your great contribution this morning. Nikola Dimitrov, we go back a long way, President of the Balkan Centre for Constructive Policies, Solution, and former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of North Macedonia. And a special welcome for my boss and friend, Rosa, Balfour, Director of Carnegie Europe and Europe's Future Fellow. And Alexander Schallenberg, President of the Europe's Futures Initiative and former Chancellor and Foreign Minister of Austria. Thank you. Where's Nathalie? Oh, Nathalie Tocci, excellent. Nathalie is here, Director of the International Affairs Institute and Europe's Futures Fellows in Rome, by the way. And Ivan Krastev, Permanent Fellow. Everybody knows Ivan, IWN. And Soli Özel, Professor of International Relations and Political Science at Kadir Has University. And Gladden is here again, Gladden Pappin, our Hungarian, well, American-Hungarian, President of the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs. So you know what you all have to do, and we wrap this up at 15:30 sharp, because there's another coffee break. And thank you all. You can begin.
Edi, your turn.
Well, thank you very much. I was just thinking how lucky you people are to have the time to do all these things. Fantastic. And thank you for putting me finally in the position to ask questions and not to answer questions. It's also a good experience. Now Ivan Krastev told me I have to be careful because you people should not be at the end angry with me because I can pay on the way the retribution of your anger. So I have to start by reminding everyone that we are here to talk about small states and big challenges. And I'm tempted to share with you that we in Albania have a say, better shit than small. Do you agree, Alexander?
Yeah.
You agree?
As long as
explain,
I agree with everything.
Explain how you agree that better shit than small.
Better what?
Floor is yours.
But we have the saying, small is beautiful.
Bring the microphone a bit closer. So.
Well, first of all, Edi, thank you for taking up this role. Secondly, it's the worst time of the day, after lunch, when sugar levels go down and fatigue goes up. We have another saying. We say normally we say small is beautiful, trying to paint it in a different way.
Because you have Austria in mind, but in general, we are talking about small states in general, and we are not all Austria, unfortunately.
That is a tough fate other people have to deal with. No, I mean, the question here is...
Really? You are here just to talk about Austria in your little country. But we invited you as a thinker overall about the small states in general.
Absolutely. Is there a question?
Yeah,
No.
Explain why you think it's true that better shit than small.
But the question is, sometimes when you do reforms, it's easier in a small society than a bigger one. They are more, you could say, elastic, more flexible. Sometimes it's difficult. We have seen it in history for larger states and societies to move. On the other side, if we look at the international arena, the motion "small is beautiful" might sound hollow recently. If I look at multilateralism, if I look at the way how people work with each other, and you have, if I look back at my 20 years of experience in the European Union, this is actually a daily calibration, trying to find a daily equilibrium between those states who are the bigger ones, France, Germany, UK, Poland, Spain, and the others, and the huge bunch of smaller kingdoms, you could say, if you compare it to the Holy Empire. But it is possible, but the smaller states sometimes have to understand that they have to go extra meter to make the bigger states still have the feeling that they have it safe, for instance, within the European Union. So there is a question of size in foreign policy, absolutely, in every sense.
Okay, thank you. No need to go longer. I just was supposed to have an opening speech, but now I took inspiration from Alexander's statement that small is easily manageable, right? And I just want to share with you a little story of our first foreign minister hitting the ground outside Albania in the moment of opening after 50 years. And poor guy had to take his first plane in life and to land no less but in New York. And he was supposed to attend the General Assembly, and the ambassador, who was another newcomer from the revolution and had no idea how the world functioned, he says, "We have a big problem." And the guy says, "Why?" He says, "We have an invitation for you to go to dinner with the Indian minister." He says, "Why the Indian minister would want me to dinner? What is this?" "We don't know, it's a big problem." He said, "But did you ask back in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Maybe the communists had some relation with India." He said, "Yes, I asked. The communists had no relation with India. No Indian came to Albania, no Albanian went to India, and nobody knows why this guy wants you for dinner tonight." So it was a big drama until finally they realized that in fact the Indian minister was organizing a dinner with 20 colleagues from different countries, because India at that time was lobbying for a seat in the Security Council. So he goes there, and at the doorstep, his Indian colleague, when he introduced himself as foreign minister of Albania, his Indian colleague says, "How big is Albania?" And he says, 28,000 kilometers. "No, how big population?" He says, 3 million. "Oh my God, I'm sorry, man, should be terribly difficult." This was his first touch of reality with the big powers. And he didn't understand. He enters, dinner starts, and suddenly the Indian guy turns to him and says, 3 million. He says, "Yeah." "Oh man, should be terrible. I really feel for you." And he says, "You feel for me with 3 million, and you are sorry for me, but what should I do for you with 1 billion? He says, "For me, nobody knows me in India." So Alexander, smaller, more complicated, because at the end it's all cousins and neighbors that want favors from you. Well, Nathalie, you know something about cousins and neighbors. Nathalie is from Italy. What's your take on small states, big challenges? You are from a big state which still has big challenges, right?
Well, I mean, I actually think that in this panel, we have an Emirati, a Bulgarian, a Brit-Italian, an Austrian, an Albanian, an Italian, a Bulgarian, a Turk, and an American. And arguably, there's only
There was
one.
a Dutch supposed to be here, she didn't come?
No, she's not.
Hungarian.
I am her incarnation.
Turkey is the new Netherlands.
Exactly. But I would argue that amongst us...
You are her.
You are her, exactly.
Incarnation. Reincarnation.
You are sure?
Yeah.
Fully? Okay.
Well, I'll make the case why he is.
Okay.
And the case is that actually amongst us, there's only one, possibly and a half, I'll give Soli that, yeah? But one of us that is from a big country. All of us, all the rest of us, are from either small countries or small countries that haven't realized they're small. So I think that's the starting point of this conversation. And I would say, you know, you initially said, Edi, I mean, you know, better shit than small.
No, I said what Albanian people says. It's not that
and Alexandra essentially said, well, you know, I mean, if you're small, multilateralism, institutions, you can... And the truth is that once upon a time, it was not shit at all to be small, right? Because indeed, it was a world in which there were these norms and rules and institutions and actually, if you knew how to navigate them, you could do fairly well by being small. I think the question is today pretty shitty to be small? And I think it's an open question mark. I mean, you raised, you know, you're talking about India. And I had the audacity a few months ago in a conference with the Indian foreign minister to sort of make the case that actually in a world in which that multilateralism, norms, institutions, blah, 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 where all this is unraveling, we're going to all do pretty badly as a result of it. You know, in a world of the survival of the fittest, we're all going to do all badly. And I said, you know, with the law in the jungle, and Jai Shankar said to me, no, we're doing quite fine in the jungle. We quite like the jungle. So I would argue that indeed, if you're big, if you are a lion, then indeed you don't necessarily do too badly, at least for a while. And, you know, there can also be this sort of great power competition, but also great power cooperation that can, maybe for some time, meaning possibly even for some decades, be a steady state. But the small or the medium, which are actually small, are going to do quite badly. And this is essentially why I think that today the logic for European integration is a global logic. It's no longer a peace on the continent after 2 world wars. It's no longer a prosperity through the single market. It's fundamentally a global logic because otherwise, given that we're all small, we're going to do pretty badly as a result of it.
Well, thank you. You stopped exactly when I wanted to stop you. And
I read your mind.
Yeah, we are Italians.
Cousins.
We are Italians. So I would go now to a representative of 2 countries. Although one has represented the country, the other one comes from the country but represents his own self. But it's interesting to hear from them because about one very small country, the other one not so big, namely North Macedonia and Bulgaria. And I would like to start with you, Nikola. You were Deputy Prime Minister when your country changed sex. So how it felt, and did you feel that the small size and the position defined somehow this very heavy intervention?
Thank you. It's a privilege to be moderated by one of the big leaders of a small country in our...
Yeah, the tallest by far. Yeah.
And talking about leaders and coming from a small state, I think one proposition that I will make is that it's really important that we have good leaders, because perhaps big states can afford mediocre leaders from time to time. I think small states cannot, because their footprint by definition is not great. And in relationships between states, personal relationships between leaders matter a lot. So I think one thing that we should do in our democracies is try to have leaders that will be tall and visible, and that will really lead, because that puts our country globally on the map. Second, we have to learn to explain our interests with the language of the big powers, and try to find something for the big powers if we want to see our interests implemented or met and addressed. In that respect, the language of values, the language of international law, of multilateral institutions is obviously quite helpful for small states, but we live now in times where these are to some or to a large extent undermined. Strength in numbers, so making friends, joining alliances. Prime Minister Rama referred to the agreement that we made with our southern neighbors, with Greece. This was one of the impossible issues of the Balkans, the so-called name dispute. We solved it by making both sides relatively equally unhappy and not satisfied, which I think what compromises, good compromises usually do. We added north to the name of the country Macedonia, so a distinction between the country of Macedonia and the Greek region of Macedonia, but at the same time Athens accepted a very basic right of self-determination. We left that problem as ethnic Macedonians who speak the Macedonian language and live in North Macedonia. And I think to the benefit of the then leadership in Athens, this was an asymmetric dispute, not only because of the sizes of the countries, but more so because one was a member state of both NATO and the European Union, and we were an aspiring country, waiting in the waiting room to join NATO for a long time, and still sort of stuck in the waiting room when it comes to the European Union. So a member state can approach a problem with a zero-sum mentality. We will have a full victory and you will have a full defeat. But such an approach usually won't solve the problem. To solve the problem between two neighbors, it has to be a lose-lose win-win. You have to have both. So to try to end this, I think people matter, leaders matter. Framing your interest in a way that will be understandable by those who can help you also matter. And having friends is important. We live in a world where even bigger and greater powers need friends, not to speak about small states.
Well, you said something that I don't agree, that you said small countries cannot afford mediocre leaders and big countries can. I would say it's not about small or big, it's about institutions, and Switzerland is quite a small country, and I'm sure nobody knows who is the leader, and I'm sure nobody remembers any Swiss leader. So it works. So maybe the mediocrity of their leaders is the grandeur of the country, because the country itself works. While when it comes to small countries or even big countries with no institutions, then yeah, leaders can mitigate the damage, although not eliminate it. So I'm passing now to Ivan Krastev, who is, in my assessment of the crew here, the freest man and woman in the room. So, Ivan, I don't know whose incarnation you are, but please share with us the thoughts, your thoughts about small countries and big leaders and vice versa. And if you have anything to say to North Macedonia, you can. If you don't have anything to say, you have not even to care, because Bulgaria is a member state and North Macedonia is just an aspiring. So aspirants can always suffer, and nobody has to really bother.
Thank you very much. First, I should confess that I don't know what it means to be a prime minister of a small state, but being political scientist from a small state is really great. Because you can say anything that you want, and nobody cares. If an American is going to make a statement, people are going to say, why Americans are saying this? I have never heard, after saying anything, somebody to say why Bulgarians are saying this. Secondly, what is important is that in a small states, the interest in foreign policy is very high, because don't forget, in our countries, everybody is former, current, or future foreign minister. So from this point of view, we should be very well briefed on the foreign policy portfolio, because somebody is going to deal with this at some point. But on a substantial story about small states, and then I say something about North Macedonia. On small states, the problem is that when there is a kind of a very well-regulated international order, good or bad, small states are very much interested, basically, which are the tables on which they invited or belong. But when you have a kind of a major disruptions, there are different types of small states. I do believe that not only Switzerland, but also the Gulf countries, in a certain way, see quite a lot of opportunities. They're small, but they're rich, and they believe that they can play a role that big states cannot do. For example, all this mediating role go very easily for some of the small states. The problem in this moment, when the great powers are running the show, is that small states have difficulties to prove their sovereignty. And then faking sovereignty is becoming critically important. And you can fake it different way. You can pretend that you have it, or you can pretend that you don't have it. But in both cases, basically, this is very much also the relations to your own public. And this is part of the story with basically Bulgaria and Macedonia, North Macedonia issue, Macedonian issue. I'm never going to forget a former president of North Macedonia who once asked me, when I asked, what about your country? And he said, Ivan, have you been stuck in a lift? I said, yes. He said, do you remember the experience? I said, yes. And he said, and we are like this for 25 years. And this is the story that it's in a certain way, both of them are trying to define this identity. It's becoming much more domestic politics than anything else. But it is also very much to try to convince your own citizens that you matter. You matter about big issues. In the case of Bulgaria, basically, it's not so much about Skopje. It's much more relations with Brussels, with Washington. In the case of Skopje, I can believe it's not very much different. And here comes the problem of the small states. Small states go in one game which nobody else understands. So we get so much into this that you go all the times on the briefings on which you are trying to explain basically to your partner why your relations with Northern Macedonia are very important. And imagine your Indian foreign minister who is going to come to visit Bulgaria, and we're going to tell him how much we rely on the support of India to try to convince North Macedonia to stay with the French agreement, or to be honest, quite often much more the other way around. So as a result of it, we are preoccupied with issues in which nobody is interested. And in my view, this is the real problem of the small states. They're becoming one-issue countries. And they cannot get out of it. It became so much domestic politics that even when you have a big leaders of small countries, they have too much constraints to move on it. And Albania-Greek relations are also an example of this, and some others on both sides. And I do believe this is the problem of the small countries, that if they are not playing a big game, they're not playing a game at all. playing a game with themselves.
Small countries for sure speak longer than big countries, and
but this is part of balance, equality.
But I would go back for a moment to your comparison between Switzerland and the Gulf countries, and I believe that it's very different. In the sense that if in Switzerland you don't know who is the leader and you don't remember leader, in the Gulf countries what is going on today is first and foremost matter of leadership. And it's so different. It's so different from, let's say, 10 years ago, and I can witness it as someone that was in office already when they were not where they are today, and today they are the new Florence. So today, talking about, we'll come back to the incarnation, but talking about reincarnation, if you want to meet Lorenzo dei Medici in person, you have to go to Riyadh, and you will meet him. If you want to know Eleanor di Toledo, the woman that turned beauty in a statecraft and was instrumental in the Medici's dynasty, you have to go to Qatar and meet in Doha. It's her, but dressed as an Arab woman, Sheikha Mayasa, who, with her leadership, is turning Doha in a place that has no distinction in any of the segments of the then Florence of Renaissance. If you go to Abu Dhabi, you have a leader that is larger than life, someone that has not only changed his country but has influenced for good big change in that part of the world, where, as a matter of fact, it happens much more than in our Europe, or let's say in your Europe, because it's not ours yet. I'm from Albania. I represent a country just with E. We don't have the U after the E, so I'm talking about EU. It happens much more than in EU when it comes to how many exhibitions open, how many shows, how many museums are built, how many neighborhoods are transformed, and so on and so further, and how many brilliant minds are gathered to serve governments. This is amazing, amazing when you see how many brilliant minds there are in Europe. And then you find them in Doha, you find them in Abu Dhabi, you find them in Riyadh, working together or alone, separately, for a vision that they cannot find anymore in their own countries here in Europe. It's really something astonishing. And this is about small countries, really. Maybe not exactly small when it comes to Saudi Arabia, but still. So it's a bit different than Switzerland. But anyhow, I want now to go to her. Sir, please speak for her and for yourself. You are very much welcome.
I cannot speak for her because we have...
No, if you are her incarnation, you have to speak for her, and then for yourself if I leave you the space.
Well, there is something that kind of bugs me, even in the description of our panel, because some definitions are fluid, and I just read a review of a recent book by Yorgos Varousakis, The West, the History of an Idea, reviewed by Yuri Sleskin. And you see there how the West has defined itself and how that definition has evolved. I was also told once that when Konrad Adenauer crossed the river, he would say to his aides that he was going into Barbaria after crossing the river. So the West was, for him, to the west of the river. So these definitions change, and I think the first thing that we need to start with, if we're going to be honest about the future, should be that the so-called rules-based international order did not preclude brutal use of power and actually breaking of rules that were set by the hegemon of that order. So sitting next to Ivan and talking about or trying to make an analogy is dangerous because he has written very forcefully against making analogies, but we are in a genesis moment. The creation of the Cold War order really took basically between 1945 and 51. And you may pick up your beginning date, but I think we are in another genesis moment, which arguably began in 2015, and it has already been 10 years, and we don't really see the end of it. We have some contours of what it looks like, and I guess I would agree that size does matter. And in fact, the contenders for big power status are the ones that are continental. Whether they'll succeed or not is a different question that I'll come to in a moment. You have China, the United States, Russia, and India if it's a contending power. And then you have the middle powers, not necessarily the small powers. Now, my contention is, and I think it was very clear in the really very brilliant two panels we had in the morning, that ultimately this is not about objective criteria or what makes you great. For the relevant future, the matter is going to be who manages their vulnerabilities more skillfully than others. Because every country, every contender has vulnerabilities. We've talked a lot about Europe's vulnerabilities. Some Jim and others mentioned the vulnerabilities of the United States. The Gulf countries have their own as well, and China has their own. And it really will be a question of who manages, and that, of course, brings us to Nikola's point. Leadership will matter, especially in such moments of transition and crises. So in that context, I think the thing that the middle powers or small powers are being forced to do, as the United States kind of shoots itself in the foot, is how best to hedge their bets. And I'll conclude with the following observation. It becomes increasingly clear, and I do work with Institut Montaigne in Paris. We have conducted interviews, we continue to conduct interviews on Trump's world with middle power representatives and try to figure out what middle powers can and cannot do in Trump's world and beyond. And what really comes forth, recently we spoke with a South Korean professor, what comes forth is this: in the short run, and that is the critical thing that Nathalie mentioned in the last panel, in the short run, you cannot fight the bully. So you will play their game, but medium to long run, you will make sure that you will never ever find yourself in such a position. And it's all straight out of The Godfather, remember, okay? And so the question, and the South Korea, after having been bullied by Trump, they acquiesce to certain things. Those investments will never come probably, but they're not trying to open up their trade relations with Europe. They're looking far more attentively at Australia. So everybody will be hedging, and everybody will be looking for new networks on which they can stand, and they can withstand the pressures that might come, what Stephen Walt in a forthcoming article calls a predatory hegemon. We may be living in a multipolar world, or we may end up in a multipolar world. I suspect it will be an asymmetrical multipolar world. And if the power distribution is finalized, I suspect that most middle power countries will have to choose sides. In a way, Turkey had to choose between siding with Russia to a certain point and the United States, and for the moment the United States seems to have won, and I think that is the formula for almost every other country.
Well, I have to remind you that the time is going much faster than your thoughts, and we have to be within the framework that Ivan Krastev gave to me. So the first round is about an introductory note, and please not as long as until now. And then the second round, I have to ask you about what you would advise me. This is how Ivan framed it. So, but don't steal my time in this ruthless way. So I turn on my right and I ask the president and the founder of the Emirate Policy Center. It's an honor to be with you, and we mentioned also your part of the world while you are here, so it's what we in Europe do. You know, we speak about others even in their presence, and we have our own conviction that we know everything. So help us to understand what we don't know, and in the meantime, I would ask you how you would put it in terms of the balance between the size, the institutions, and the leadership.
Prime Minister, it's an honor to be in a panel you chaired. We use now a new concept, which we call it middle power, rather than small power. And I just published my new book on UAE as a small power dealing with the global war. In many ways, small states, we'd like to go with the title, small states are the stress test, I would say, of the international order. When multilateralism works, they can prosper. When it breaks down and power politics returns, they are the first to feel exposed. My argument here is simple. Small states cannot afford nostalgia for the old order or fatalism about the new one. They need a deliberate strategy urging 3 axes: smart alignments, strategic resilience, and niche leadership, which you, Excellency, you mentioned. Here, I would say strategy, not size, will decide the future of those small states. So, in a harsher world, small states cannot rely on a goodwill or inertia. Their survival and prosperity will depend on, and here I try to combine the 2 questions of yours, that first, when we're talking about alignment, how smartly they align. Anchored in reliable partnership, not trapped in one-sided dependencies. This is now my country trying to do in the world of competition between the global states and global giants. The second, how seriously they invest in resilience, hard security, economic security, and societal cohesion. The third, how ambitiously they pursue niche leadership. My country is blessed with a futuristic leadership who look to the future and who knows that he is in small or middle power, and around us is many, many challenges in our region and in the global, and how to navigate between this. So by using diplomacy, law, and expertise, shape that rules will govern everyone. The question not whether small states are doomed in a world of giants. The real question is whether they can organize themselves individually, collectively, to turn their vulnerability, which you mentioned, into a source of agility, credibility, and strategic relevance. This is how they can survive in this world. Hedging is one of those strategies they are using. If there is a, I will use my country as a model. There is pressure from both giants, from the Chinese and from the American. If you go to those, to China, American will question, well, you are transferring our technology to China. And if you went to United States, the Chinese saying, well, we are not going to give you semiconductors because American will look at it. So how to balance that? You need the real factor here, or elements, is niche leadership.
Thank you. Although I would add that it's not just about the size in itself or even the institutions only, but it's also about the geographical and geopolitical context. Because if UAE would be a candidate member, a candidate state for entering the EU and will go through all the interim benchmarks Albania is going through, I'm sure you'd be less energetic today. But let me turn to someone that can give something important to this flat discussion and maybe make it a bit more bumpy. I'm looking forward. The director of the president of the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs. I was told that you are a MAGA conservative. So I'm very happy to be here with you, and please shake them. Just do it.
Well, I grew up in a small state, the state of Arkansas, under the benign dictatorship of my friend Governor Bill Clinton in the 1980s. As a citizen, actually, of an even smaller, what we would call microstate, an American Indian tribe on my father's side that survived by making a treaty with the United States government. So my perspective is that treaties are very important, and you have to hold them to them, for sure. So in those days, I was even in downtown Little Rock on a certain night in November 1992. In those days, we thought that the state of Arkansas was the center of the known universe. For a brief 8-year period, it was the center of the known universe. At the end of that 8-year period, we realized this was not exactly a status that would last forever, but it became a place from which you could see a geopolitical phenomena. Now, moving to something more serious, we've been talking about multipolarity. And this reminds me of a point I wanted to make about that and about the nature of the liberal international order that came into being under the presidency of Clinton, or that expanded to a global reach. And I think this is significant for small states. So under the unipolar moment, what were the things that were united? Well, it wasn't just unipolar because it was run from Washington, D.C., by a bunch of people from Arkansas, but rather it was unipolar in each layer of the strategic stack, if you will. There's a cultural matrix, an economic matrix, and a military matrix. And in all of those, there was a liberal, globalist understanding that was dominant. So the cultural understanding became ever more progressively liberal. The economic understanding and policies were basically neoliberal, and it's a contested term, but Washington consensus, whatever you want to call it, and militarily, certainly under the United States. So when we say, and it's not even members of the panel, but even the Secretary of State early in the Trump administration, when they point out that things are moving in a more multipolar direction, really what's happening is that the layers of this stack have spread out. There's competition in each area, and and I think Ebtesam, my good friend, actually nailed it for small states today. You can no longer just participate, you can no longer win and maintain your standing just by participating in the liberal international order, which consists of this stack or recipe. I'm not dismissing it entirely. There are many strengths of it. It worked in many ways during its time briefly. It had some legitimate accomplishments. That's not in question. But the question is, can small states win by just subscribing to the same old deal, or what do they have to do? So I think that's where a different recipe or a different, frankly, more realistic set of tendencies are necessary. I think it's something, again, that you can see more easily outside of the European Union, outside of Europe. Small states or medium-sized states, whatever you want to call them, outside of Europe, are beginning to realize, in some cases even realized this decades ago, that the simple liberal international order subscription service is not going to be adequate to securing their place. That is, we can discuss much more about this. There are many other points that have been made, but I think that's the fundamental reality that many states are starting to adjust to. So then you have to say, what are my, like, who am I, where am I, what's the neighborhood look like, what are my sources of strength, and which are the set of dominant factors for me? And the answer to that question just simply won't come from automatically returning to the old subscription service. So indeed, it will take, I think it can function in a lot of different ways. Of course, I'm working in Hungary. The Prime Minister of Hungary has managed, again, through a sometimes contrarian set of bets, to establish a kind of role for Hungary in the whatever post-liberal order, the newly emerging international order. There's a lot of controversy about that. People can criticize it or not. But as a matter of fact, it's something that's historically surprising. I think it's surprising to most Hungarians. It's what's giving him a lot of strength, even going into the election. And I think that that will play out in different ways in different countries. But fundamentally, it's about a more realistic self-accounting and a more realistic accounting of one's place in the international order.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for finally giving me the answer why I admire Bill Clinton, because he's a benign dictator. This is the similarity, I guess. So I'm turning to Rosa Balfour, and I'm asking her directly, is Bill Clinton a benign dictator? And how you would put him in the context of the actual leaders in terms of his propensity to dictatorship?
As a governor, this was during his governorship. But.
So as president, he was a Democrat, for sure.
As president, he was a true politician.
Which means a bad guy or a good guy?
He really liked retail politics. And he really liked engaging with people. I mean, the staff constantly had difficulty pulling him away from campaign events. If he were speaking here, he would have shaken hands with every single person in this room prior to leaving. And I think that's something that after him didn't have the same place. And
so you want me to retire my question to her, or I can continue?
I'm just clarifying that the dictatorship applied especially in Arkansas, and it worked really well there.
Okay, so
question, the point.
No, I don't want you to interact with the gentleman because let's forget Arkansas. What is Arkansas at the end? You know, somewhere I don't even know what it is. So let's forget Arkansas. Let's focus to the big picture. So then I would ask you something else. Do you think the rules-based order that a lot in Europe and in the United States are crying about was truly a rules-based order?
Mm-hmm. It was a very imperfect rules-based order.
It was perfect.
Imperfect.
Imperfect.
It was a very
But if a rules-based order is very imperfect, does it not mean that the rules were not the same for everyone? And if the rules were not the same for everyone, it is really an order that we should cry about, or we should look for a new one that is better?
Okay, my personal opinion is that had we started to look for a better rules-based order earlier, we would be in a better situation today. I think the West, and that is partly the problem of Bill Clinton, the unipolar moment, end of the Cold War, the rest of the world wants to become like us, it's all fine, and the West did not interrogate itself on the nature of its power, the rise of other powers, and how that world order needed to be reformed in order to accommodate for emerging powers. That's what happened, I think, after the 1990s, perhaps with, come the 2000s, it should have been obvious that that should have been something that ought to have been pursued. End result is that at the moment we are living through a major backlash against the liberal world order, and we are living through an ideological battle, and if authoritarianism and the rule of might is to prevaricate, that will be definitely to the expense of small states, definitely to the expense of middle powers, and I would put the European Union in that category, because if Europeans don't get their act together in the sense that we discussed earlier this morning about competitiveness and, what role can Europe play on the global chessboard, well, then it has to learn from small states, because maybe EU versus Albania, the feeling is from Albania that EU is a major power because it's setting the rules, but elsewhere it is not the case. So that would be my answer to that. And I think, Nathalie first was doing the sort of head count of who comes from where. I come half British, so I come from a country that has been...
Sorry.
Yes, exactly. That has really struggled to come to terms with the fact that it's no longer global Britain, it's no longer an empire. The other half is Italian. I live in Brussels, and I think that sort of reckoning that the Brits ought to do, the risk is that Europeans will have to do that as well. And in fact, I would say that in many counts they need to start like now. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned from small states. And if I may, you're giving me a couple of minutes more? If I may, always. I think if you look at what small states have done and how they've managed to punch above their weight, we have several stories here. One is the Hungarian story that was referred to. However, I would also argue that in doing that, Hungary has actually sold its sovereignty to Russia, to China,
really?
Maybe to the United States.
Allow me to fully disagree with that. And as we are going on, you don't need to finish. You said what was important for the conversation. This is why I'm here. Otherwise, what I'm doing here. So I'm just coming back to you right away. And first of all, it's totally not true, in my view, that Hungary has sold any sovereignty to anyone. But let me ask you, Viktor Orban was the only person in every European room that was calling for a ceasefire, when the ceasefire was much more something that would help Ukraine and could have been accepted by Vladimir Putin. And just because saying the word ceasefire, he was treated like the word I used in the beginning of this conversation. Something big changes in the United States. A new guy enters the White House. When he mentions ceasefire, everyone jumped on the word like a contribution to the vocabulary came from the other side of the ocean, and that the ceasefire was a word that was previously never ever used in Europe. So, what do you think about that?
Okay, I'm going to answer.
Tell me.
I'm going to answer your question.
And guess what? When Viktor Orban was calling for a ceasefire was possible. When the call for a ceasefire came in the second, for the second time, the ceasefire is obviously not possible because Vladimir Putin may be an assassin, but he's not stupid, right? So answer.
Okay, I will, but first I want to finish what I was thinking.
No, you'll not finish because we are in the second part of our conversation, and I am a benign dictator, but still a dictator. Okay. So let me just, don't mess with the dictators even when they are benign. This is what I learned from Bill Clinton. So
no, I do want to just say bullet points. First of all, small states do policy entrepreneurship, they do partnerships, they do alliances.
She insists.
Yes, I insist.
Her British,
I'm a
deranged
fighter.
This is what? This was what? This was what?
Eddie, that's beginning of a revolution.
This was an applause. This was an applause to console the British damaged side of the lady. Okay.
This is because I want to finish my thoughts. So policy, entrepreneurship, networks, partnerships, alliances, this is what small states bring to the table, and it's something valuable, and it's not all about state power. And I know that at the beginning of the first panel I said, you know, states are trying to get their power back. They don't have it yet. There are also other forces in the world. On Ukraine and ceasefire, I find your comments, with all due respect, a little bit partisan. I think the conditions for a ceasefire are not there today. I think Russia has never been serious about a ceasefire, and Russia is still bent on the territorial acquisition of large regions in Ukraine, and Ukrainians disagree with that. So that is where we are.
Okay, well, I don't understand the applause. What is it? Can someone explain why is the applause for what? What happened to be applauded? I don't understand. I'm not here to fight anyone and to look for applauses, but I'm simply trying to have a conversation that at the end will not be boring. This is the most important. And I am sorry, but I don't know where is the partisanship on my side. Why I'm partisan. I just made a very simple question. Why, when the word ceasefire is spelt by Viktor Orban, it's like a dirty word and the guy is treated like a pariah? And why, when the word ceasefire is mentioned by Donald Trump, is the most genuinely beautiful word that all the leaders of Europe jump and then repeat relentlessly. Ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. This is my question. No, I don't need your answer anymore because I'm clear about it. So let me turn to the gentleman. And I have a question for you, but please be focused on my questions. Give me the answers. I'm looking forward, and don't open up in many ways. But I'm sure you'll not do it because you are not you don't have this Brexit problem. So I want you to tell me because you mentioned also the rule-based order, and when it comes to us, a country like us, Albania or other countries in our position, that have to follow the big guys, and the big guys want to rearm Europe because they believe that Putin will go to Copenhagen and will bomb Denmark. But in the same time, your country does not really have the capacity to finance all this ramp up, and to do it has to give up on things that are so important and that need so much more efforts than in other countries that are much more developed. How you deal with that? if you'd advise me.
I'd love to advise you, yeah, if I can.
Please.
You can only do things that your capacity allows you to do. If you can resist others while maintaining your sovereignty, while maintaining your ability to actually manage your country, then you don't have to follow them. But if you are in a community, whether as a member or just basically being part in the vicinity, then you have to weigh your options. And you can make the right decision or the wrong decision, but I cannot tell you what under those circumstances the right or the wrong decision will be. That's what you as a political leader will have to actually decide. And that's part of being a middle power.
Just to be very clear, it was a theoretical question, because when it comes to us Albanians, we are Western Talibans, and we go with them all the way. And if they fail, we say, okay, we had to fail together with them because we are with them.
I tried to answer it.
No, I understand.
Albania.
I understand.
I mean, if you're Vietnam,
because there are many countries that are in this dilemma. And I'm coming to Ivan because I'm going to Hungary now, which is a country that is living a big controversy with the European Union, but which, in the same time, however, and whatever we can deal with Viktor Orban, time is showing that he was not wrong when he was calling for a different approach that maybe had to be balanced with the approach that we, the others, followed, but not completely rejected. So being a small country, Hungary is a small country, and standing for a different opinion, you think is the right thing to do when all the just different opinion can bring so many problems to you?
Listen, the small countries has two options. Either they're the most loyal players, or they're basically trying to be the internal dissenter, and it works particularly well when you are in the European Union. To be honest, Albania cannot play this role, because the strength of Mr. Orban's strategy was based on the fact that he's a member of the European Union. Yes, he had a strategy which is a very much a hedge fund strategy. He had, in my view, a legitimate point that Europe should have been insisting on having negotiations with Russia and not outsourcing to the Americans negotiating for us. On this, is Russia be ready for a ceasefire back then? I don't know. Probably you know more than me, because this is not a theoretical question. In a certain way, this is a story that depends on context. But what in my view is interesting in the Hungarian case is the following. Mr. Orban was extremely successful of positioning Hungary as a sovereign player in the liberal order. So what is going to change now is that basically this strategy is going to be adopted by many players. Don't forget, not paradoxically, in the moment in which his time came, part of his strategy is going to be less successful than it was before, for three reasons. Because what is interesting that I take very seriously Prime Minister Orban, and he's very articulate in his position. So from this point of view, it's not that we don't know what he's doing, because every summer he's explaining very clearly what he's doing. His major strategy was that the strengths of Hungary is, first, Hungary does not want to destroy common economic market, because if the common economic market is destroyed, Hungarian strategy, which is very much based on attracting Chinese investments and making out of Hungary the gateway of China investments, does not make sense. One of the important things about small countries is that they are never interesting on their own, unless for very specific geographical occasions and others. So he did it. The strength of Hungary was that Hungary has one quality that none of the other states was ready to, and this was the readiness to veto common policies on China. Not so much Russia, to be absolutely honest. It was about China. What is going to happen if basically there going to be a major clash, how it was basically also, this was the major risk on two levels. If this same strategy is going to produce so much fragmentation in the European Union that European Union cannot go together, and if European market is going to fragment, this strategy does not work anymore. Nevertheless, it was a very successful strategy in the previous period. For this strategy, and this is my last point, in order to play this game, you cannot easily imitate Orban, because it is a high risk and high reward, but you should take a very high risk. If you're losing, basically you're losing everything. And I do believe this is part of the story now. On the concrete Russia-Ukrainian case, in my view, you're right. And the story was that Europe decided that we are going to define all the war totally in moral terms. There is a moral term. It's not a secret who invaded whom. But it does not mean that you do not have an interest in this. Europe has an interest. This interest is much closer to the Ukrainian interest than to the Russian interest, but it does not mean that our interest is identical with the Ukrainian interest or that it is identical with the American interest. And one of the things that comes from our previous discussion, in my view, is that what I found particularly troubling in the American strategy is that they're allowing, together with the Russians, to keep Europe out of the game. As a Russian colleagues told me, the Russian diplomatic strategy is America in, Europe out, Ukraine down, playing with the famous NATO story. If this is the case, Europe has a problem. And in this, in a certain way, Hungarian strategy on its own is not going to help us solve it.
Well, let me clarify something, because I'm in a completely unusual position here, because I've never had this role, and I am discovering in the hard way that it's not easy, this role. But I have to clarify that I'm asking and I'm teasing and I'm provoking, not necessarily expressing my views all the time. And in the meantime, when I spoke about Viktor and his proposal, it was not about if this was just that and that was the thing to do. It was not about pretending that Putin would accept or not. It was about something totally different, about the space of debate and of coming out with a strategy. Because I've found before quite interesting, to say it mildly, that EU put itself, whole Europe put itself in the American autopilot and followed Joe Biden blindly and just repeated like an echo chamber what was coming from Washington. But even after, this continued to be the case. And sorry, but I think that for its history, for its culture, for its reasons of existing, Europe cannot be a force that stays in the stage, in the world stage, and does not have a peace plan. I'm not saying make peace with the aggressor. I'm not saying be this or be that. I'm not saying anything of that. But having a peace plan is not about who Putin is. It's about who you are. Mm-hmm. And when I was asked by an Israeli journalist, is it even worthy to continue and believe in a two-state solution with these people on the other side? I said, it's not about the people on the other side. It's about who you are. And this kind of disturbs me a lot. Now, who am I to be disturbed? You know, I may be the tallest, but I never forget that I represent a very small country. So my attitude is, when you can say things as you think, but when you have to do things as they want. So this is the small state thing in this context. So let me go to another small state where being small is beautiful. And let me ask Alexander, because he comes also from an experience in the scene and behind the scene. first of all, how much you miss NATO, Alexander, and then and how much you feel disturbed that you are not being obliged to ramp up your military spending.
Well, very easily.
No, answer my question.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Very easily.
You all tend to tell people how brilliant you are, but answer my question.
I should have expected how you will run the show, but it's fun, at least for the male members of the podium. We don't miss it because we never had it. NATO now. We have still 70, 80% of Austrians in favor of neutrality. Might be a complete wrong concept because the Austrians actually believe that neutrality gives them security, which is nonsense. Neutrality means you're on your own and you have to be more resilient than everybody else. And after the Second World War, we were actually told do neutrality following the example of the Swiss. We never did. We have lost every war since 1866, Sadova, and the Austrian people are done with war. And now we are trying to get to terms with that. Having said so, actually we have decided to ramp up the budget of the military. We will reach 2.5%. But it is actually catching up. It's not, we didn't do anything for 30 years, but it's a start, it's a start. But I want to come back. You had a very valid point, I believe, on the nature of debates, and it's not about the size of Hungary or countries. The nature of debates we are conducting in Europe, sometimes. And I have the feeling, and especially started after the Russian war of aggression, and we talked about it a lot already, there's kind of, in French you call it pensée unique. You're only allowed to think in a certain way, and you shouldn't say anything else, unless you're very big and powerful, and you could be maybe Emmanuel Macron, who might be able to say something, but everybody else should shut up. And I believe that is unfair and untrue, and it comes also, and that is place for Viktor Orban. There is a situation where whatever Viktor says, everybody is gasping. And you have headlines from Porto to Helsinki. He says something on migration, everybody goes bananas. If Mette Frederiksen, the socialist prime minister of Denmark, says exactly the same thing on migration and asylum, not even the Deutsche Presseagentur picks it up. Because she's a lady, she's Danish, she's socialist.
Just for the record, Mette would, if she would be here, because she did it with me and I can do it with you on her behalf, she would say, I'm not a socialist, I'm a social democrat.
Okay, sorry for...
So socialist is me here.
Okay, you're the...
I like socialist because it's more vague, than social democrat. So turning to, turning to Nathalie, and we have only 12 minutes, 22 seconds left, and considering that I'll eat the 22 seconds in only 12 minutes left. So Nathalie, what's your point on what we are discussing here about what is going on with Europe being practically, sorry to say, in this moment, treated as irrelevant in the talks, in the process, whatever this talks or process may end with, maybe with some result, maybe with no result, but still, Europe is, how is Europe in this?
Okay, so listen, let me make, there's also, I think, a way of bringing in the Middle East into this conversation, a comparison between the Gulf in the Middle East and Europe and the Ukraine war. What are the differences here and what are the similarities? I think that when it comes to the Gulf countries in the Middle East, there is a vision. And there is a vision of a stable Middle East, not necessarily one in which democracy, human rights, but let's say a stable Middle East in which the basic tenets of international law are respected so that there is a conducive climate for prosperity and business, right? So that's the vision. So when you have some actors acting as excessively revisionist, for a long time this was Iran, there is a pushback against that. Now the revisionist actor in the Middle East is Israel, and there has been pushback against that. So there is a clear vision. Secondly, there is leverage, and leverage obviously mainly through money when it comes to the Gulf. But then if we include Turkey as part of the conversation, there is also military force.
Nathalie, you have 30 seconds. Come now from the Gulf to Europe.
I'm
coming.
Please,
fly.
But thirdly, what there has been in the Gulf is agency, collective agency. What has happened when it comes to Gaza is not indeed waiting for a plan, but bringing a plan. And then, of course, with a little bit of flattery and buying and all the rest of it, making it look like a US plan, but it was a Gulf plan, right? Now, what's the difference with Europe? When it comes to Europe and Ukraine, we also have a vision. It's a vision of a free, democratic, independent Ukraine that integrates in Europe. The vision is there. We also have leverage, far more than what we recognize. In fact, we've got far more leverage on Ukraine than the United States does. The United States provides no military support to Ukraine anymore. Right, so the leverage, be it in terms of military support, be it in terms of sanctions, is actually European leverage. What Europe lacks is agency, right? But this is a psychological thing, right? It is, I mean, we talked about it in the previous session. It is about getting, well, firstly, summoning the courage and summoning the agency to say yes, we can, because the rest is there.
Well,
I was brief.
Maybe, yeah. For being an Italian, you were okay, but maybe there is also something else that Europe. When we think about Europe, we think about many states, but Europe itself does not exist. It's an entity that does not have a meter square. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? Wait a minute.
The Gulf does not exist, yeah? But yes,
let me finish. What are you talking about? Well, let me finish. What is this? What is this? I have to moderate, and I'm being moderated. This is unfair. No, okay. I'm not going to take more time. I'm going to go to my dear president of the Hungarian Institute of International Relations, because I want to ask him about what is described by many, not in our echo chamber, but outside of our echo chamber, as the Asian century, and meaning the big China comeback and all this. And when I see why, again, think of Bill Clinton, and one line I very much like from Bill Clinton was, America has to be the most interested power in multilateralism, not multipolarism, but multilateralism. Because now that we are the number one, we have to prepare the world to be good to us when we become number two. So the floor is yours now, and do whatever you want with Bill Clinton and all these liberals.
As I said, he was a great governor of Arkansas, but that claim definitely makes no sense to me whatsoever, and I think it's that claim which led to a lot of policies which weakened American standing and ultimately have made it less competitive in the world. So I think clearly the multilateral structures are not going away. They're still going to exist. America is going to remain a key player in them. Some of the balance of that has changed, but American diplomacy is a huge craft, if you will, and it's active all over the world. But when we think about the Asian century that you mentioned, while the rise of Asia is a fact that has to be understood and analyzed, and the better that we're able to do that, the better decision-making will follow from it. Actually, when he was a senator, it was then Senator Rubio's office which pioneered this from within the American political scene, evaluating sector by sector where deindustrialization had happened in the US. Well, regardless of what we think about the different scenarios for world order, a scenario in which the US remains less and less industrially competitive, like in which it doesn't get back its manufacturing and become of course it is an economic powerhouse in many ways, but in which it doesn't recover some of its economic sovereignty, if you will, its control over its own destiny when it comes to its economic production. That has gone away. That's the washing away of that is part of what led to Trump. Well, a world in which it doesn't regain that is a world in which even the things that are most valued in this room are at risk. So I think it's in the interest of everyone that the U.S. comes to its senses economically, and I think the Trump administration is the first one to identify these national industrial priorities. Then there's a question about what is going to be the nature of its relationship with the rising power of China and how it deals with that. At the moment, the national security strategy of the administration isn't published, so you can only go on reading the tea leaves. Clearly, the president is interested in settling the terms of their economic relationship first. But there are rising powerhouses in Asia. It's not just an American-dominated international order, but it is one in which America made some bad decisions for a long period of time regarding the sources of its strength. So I think in this case, there's some advice that works both for large powers and small powers, namely identify your sources of strength, work to shore them up as much as possible. For myself, I think that's likely to come from a conservative and nationalistic standpoint, but there can be other competitors as well.
Thank you. And now we are in red here. It's the last 5 minutes. So Nikola, I trust you that you will be more Western than Balkanic in the time. So tell me what you make of all this conversation so far, what you think of me and of the people around, and what is your take from this exchange of thoughts and of opinions?
Well, I think we were entertaining.
Me?
All of us. I think
you put even yourself in as entertaining.
At times confuse moderation with domination.
Which is all what moderation should be about. Otherwise, you would keep talking endlessly, and everyone would fall asleep because the sugar, as he said, is up now.
But we still like you. So, if you allow me, small states in our context, in our region, we are in the midst of the continent, and maybe to connect it with one point with the previous two sessions. I think we in the region can make a difference. I think enlargement is very much part of this getting our act together as Europeans, and I think we are Europeans even though we are not part of the Union. We have the right to think about our continent. I think we as a region can help in this endeavor by also assuming more responsibility for our future. We can learn to be more of a region. So I think we need to support you and your efforts and the one and our friends in Montenegro as well. If there is a hope that there will be a success, success is great for all of us. We can also be helped a bit more. When we are blocked on 19th century issues, it will be good for our neighbors to step in and to say, stop the nonsense with North Macedonia. They deserve to be in the process. So I think in many ways we bring a perspective that Europe needs at the moment, which is because we admire them, we've been looking up to them for a long time. Sometimes I think we believe more in European values than some of the Europeans within the European Union themselves, because of the simple fact that when you're on the inside for too long, you forget how cold.
No, but it's more, listen, it's simpler. We are in love, and we want to marry. They are married, and that's why they are less enthusiastic about where they are. But this doesn't make us less enthusiastic, so this is the thing, I believe, to explain it in a brutal Balkanic way. So I wish you already finished, Nikola. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm very thankful to everyone, and let me share with you a last story. It's a way to ask forgiveness to whomever felt disturbed from my rough moderation. I had a grandmother who was Catholic and very wise woman. And when I was a kid, you can imagine I was not an easy beast to deal with. And my parents would be all the time after me, and my grandmother would be all the time with me, of course. And I remember many things she said, but one of them comes to me every time I have to deal with a panel. She said, son, don't worry, parents have to do what they have to do. And what they have to do is to go after you. But you will become a man at the end. So perfection is not possible for a man. You will make your own mistakes, you will make your own things. Sometimes you'll do bad things, because men usually don't miss the opportunity to do bad things. But please, never forget what your grandma is telling you. What a man can never afford is to be boring. So I hope myself and this beautiful panel, as Trump would say, was not boring. And if this was the case, my mission is accomplished. And you can say whatever you want about what I said. I can't care less, because the important is that you are not bored. And to me, it's great that I see in the room people much more awake than the moment this started. So small countries should not be boring. This is my take of this. Big countries can be boring, and Europe can continue to be the empire of boredom, but we owe to Europe to bring some moments of, why not, humor, laughter, whatever it is, but not boredom. So we are now on time, which is for me a personal success, because I usually break every chronometer, and Nathalie knows something as having tried to moderate me. And she has a face that is in full of revenge, because she's looking me in a difficult position. So thank you very much, and see you next time. And I soon, what do you mean soon? After the break again, me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to improve during the break. Thank you so much.